So we want to wrap details in this, right? So that in case there's an error from the API that it doesn't crash. And I would be super tempted to wrap this inside of an error boundary. But there's a big thing that you have to know about error boundaries is it only works with children inside of it, right? So if I wrapped this with an error boundary here, right? Or error boundary, this wouldn't work. And the reason being is that you would catch things in carousel, but you wouldn't catch them inside of the class itself. So it can't catch it inside of the class that it's in. So we have to make it basically a higher order component above details. And I'll show you just a really quick way of doing that. So rather than mess with details itself, what we're going to do is we're going to export a default function here. Function, and it's going to be called details with error boundary. It's going to take in props, okay? And it's going to return an error boundary. And then it's going to render details inside of it. So this automatically imported up here error boundary as well. So make sure you import that there like I did on line 4. And then down here, we still have a problem with this. So this is correctly wrapping an error boundary around details, right? And now this will catch all of the various different errors that could happen inside of details. But we have these props, right? And we want to pass these props into details. How do we do that? I mean, you could do something like props equals props, right? But this isn't quite the same. Because now inside of here, I would have to say this dot props, right? It would be weird. So that's not right. I could go figure out everything that details is getting from its parent components and then by name pass them in, but that's burdensome. I don't want to do that either. So I'm going to show you a little trick that you can do as well. You can actually just put these curly braces here and say dot 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 props, like that. This is going to spread the props across details, right? So imagine for a second that props had something. What is details even using from props? Props ID, right? So it's getting ID. So this would be equivalent from saying ID equals props.id, right? And then writing out all of those piece by piece. This is just a faster way of doing it. Now, let me offer you a cautionary tale. The advantage of React, the reason why we use React is because it's very explicit. It's very easy to go through and understand piece by piece what everything is doing. Error boundary here has no interaction and does not care at all about the props. It's just trying to wrap something and then let it continue rendering, right? So error boundary is not doing anything for you other than catching errors, and it's details that's actually doing all the work here. So we just want to be a pass-through for this details with error. I spelled that wrong. Details with error boundary. Not that that matters. That's for debugging purposes, and that's all. So you only want to use these spread operators when the component doesn't actually really care about what those props are, right? It's just meant to be a pass-through. Don't use this willy-nilly. It makes your code harder to read for the most part. Make sense? Okay. So now if we go look at our app, everything should look exactly the same, right? Because this has no errors on it. But what happens if I go into the details page now and say details? All right. And let's say here inside of component and mount, we're just going to say throw new error like that. What's going to happen? Hopefully, you can say that there was an error with this page. Click here to go back and wait 5 seconds. We'll go do the 5 seconds part. We haven't done that part, right? But you can also see here that you get the error, right? and you can say error boundary caught in error. So it gives you the message, which is this very descriptive error that I just invented. And it also gives you all of the stuff where this came from a component didn't mount, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Now if we click here, it'll take us back here. Now if we didn't have the error boundary, this would just crash the entire program, right? So that's what error boundaries are useful for.